Hi everyone, welcome to another TOEFL class. I'm Siley and I'm one of the expert TOEFL teachers here at e2language.com, and today we are going to look at the TOEFL speaking section. So today I'm going to give you 3 tips to get 30 on 30 in the speaking section of the test. Let's quickly have a look at what tasks you will see in the speaking section on test day. In the first task, you'll be given 2 options. You'll have to choose one, give your opinion, and explain why you prefer that particular choice. In task 2, you'll read a campus announcement or read a letter, and then you'll listen to a conversation between 2 students discussing the topics mentioned in the announcement or letter, and then you'll be asked to summarize information from both those sources. In the third task of the test, you'll be given an academic reading, which is basically a short passage about some sort of an academic concept. This could be from an arts subject like sociology, psychology, or it could be something from the hard sciences like physics, chemistry. So it could basically be like any academic topic. And then you listen to part of a lecture related to the concept that you just read about. And the lecturer will usually give examples and explain the concept in further detail. And finally, you'll be asked to summarize information from the reading and the listening. Task 4 is very similar to Task 3, just that you will be listening to a lecture and then you have to summarize the information from that lecture. So there's no reading in Task 4. Now that we know what to expect in this section, let's see how to ace it. As I said at the beginning of the lecture, I'm going to give you 3 tips to help you achieve 30 on 30 in the speaking section. Let's start off with tip number 1. This one is fairly straightforward. You just need to take notes. It's important to remember that note-taking is a very important skill for the TOEFL test because you'll need your note-taking skills in the listening section and also in the speaking section, especially for the second, third, and fourth task, where you'll have to listen to something and then summarize. And in the time pressure that you have, so you'll be given just a few seconds to prepare your response, it's really hard to be able to come up with something to say for a minute, which is the time that you'll be given to speak. So it's very important that you take notes, and not only take notes, but that you take good notes and you have all the note-taking skills that you need beforehand so that you don't struggle on test day. So how will your notes help you on test day? The first thing your notes will help you do is stay on topic. This is really important because sometimes when you're given a topic and asked to talk for like an entire minute, it can be easy to sort of ramble on and go off topic or even talk about things that are not in the reading and the listening. Another reason this is super important is because it's part of the marking criteria. So if we look at these rubrics here, this is basically a marking guide that examiners will use to mark your speaking responses. So we have 2 different ones here, one for independent speaking tasks. Well, now that they've gotten rid of the second one, it's just one task. The first rubric is for the independent speaking task, which is the first one. And the second one is for the integrated speaking tasks, which is task 2, 3, and 4. Let's have a closer look at the independent speaking rubric. What does it say? If we look at the topic development criterion, it says, response is sustained and sufficient to the task. That means that they'll be looking for your answer to the question that they have asked you. In task 1, they'll ask you to choose between 2 sides, yeah? So they'll be looking for your choice and what reasons you've used to support that choice. So it's very important that you stay on topic and the reasons that you give are relevant to the question that has been asked. Now let's look at the integrated speaking rubrics. conveys the relevant information. So here, because you have to use information from the lecture and the reading or the conversation that they've given you, you have to be able to choose relevant information. And again, when you're speaking, you need to stay on topic and not get caught up in mentioning all the minor details, which you don't really need to include in your answer. Now let's look at the second reason. So the second reason is organizing your ideas. Why is this important? Let's go back to our rubrics again. Now, here it says relationships between ideas are clear or clear progression of ideas. What this means is that your ideas should be structured in a logical manner. They should flow beautifully so that the person who is listening to your answer is able to follow your train of thought. As you can see, these two bits make up about 33% of your total speaking score, which is why taking notes can really help improve your score. Let's not forget the integrated speaking rubrics. What did they say? Again, pretty similar to what the previous one said, clear progression of ideas. So everything that I just said applies to both types of tasks. So if you take good notes and use them skillfully in your answers, you'll be able to get top marks in the topic development criterion of the rubrics. I've made a few note-taking templates for you guys, so you can quickly go through these. We won't have time to go into detail about each task and how to answer it. But if you go to etlanguage.com, we conduct live classes every day and look at each of these tasks in further detail. We look at note-taking strategies. We look at how to implement these templates, looking at different practice questions. So be sure to join us. All right, let's keep going. Let's look at tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to learn some useful words and phrases. So what kinds of words and phrases would you have to know in order to be able to get a really good score in this section of the test? So there's basically 3 things that you'll be expected to do. Number 1, you'll be expected to express your opinion and the opinion of others. Number 2, you'll be asked to give reasons for your opinion and for the opinion of others, and you'll be expected to give some examples as well. So here's a list of expressions or phrases that you can use to express opinion. I agree with, she agrees with. So this is positive, right? So when you're agreeing with someone, that means that you share their opinion. The opposite of agree would be disagree. So you could say, he disagrees with, I disagree with, she disagrees with. The next one is I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of the new policy. Or if you don't really agree with the new policy, you can say I'm against, or he or she is against the new policy. I prefer. So when you're given 2 options and there's one thing that you're more likely to do or that you like to do better, then you would say I prefer. For example, I prefer to live on campus. You could also say he believes, he's of the opinion that, or his view of, or her view of. Let's look at how we can use these different phrases in sentences in just a bit. So notice how with third person pronouns, you always use an S with the verb. So don't forget your S's. So it would be I believe, but he believes, she believes. I agree, or I disagree, but he agrees, she agrees, or they disagree. Let's see what they sound like in sentences. I am of the opinion that students should have access to more facilities. She is in favor of the university's decision to postpone the midterms. The students' view of the new policy is mostly positive. The professor prefers Freud's approach. He believes that this theory is more accessible. So accessible just means that it's easier to understand. So these are some really good ways of starting sentences that express an opinion. And as I mentioned earlier, it could be your opinion or someone else's. It really doesn't matter. It's important to know these phrases in advance because this will help you buy time on test day. If you're thinking about what to say next, if you have these phrases in mind, you'll get those extra couple of seconds to think about your sentence structure or the words you're going to use and all that kind of stuff. So the second thing you'll be expected to do is to give reasons. And here's some words and phrases that you can use to do exactly that. You've probably seen these words, heard them, and used them yourselves, but let's go through these anyway. So we have because or because of, due to, since, thanks to. Thanks to is usually to give a reason that's positive, given that, on account of, and to mention another cause for the same event, you could say another reason for, just so you don't sound repetitive. All right, let's look at these words in action. Well, words and phrases. The letter states that the pool will remain closed on account of bad weather. So notice how on account of is usually followed by a noun. She was finally able to get a job thanks to student support services. Again, followed by a noun. He likes to study there because it's quiet. The event was cancelled because of the unruly crowd. Unruly is not well behaved. Like people who misbehave are unruly. Given that most students want to borrow this book, it'll be restocked soon. So this is a slightly different sentence structure. So you can use this to sound stand out and show the examiner the extent of your vocabulary and your knowledge of grammar basically. Now let's look at how to give examples. These are pretty short and sweet. So you can obviously say, for example, for instance. It's okay to say like. A lot of people in conversation would use like quite a bit, but they are a bit hesitant to use it in the exam. But it's completely okay. If you sound conversational, you're actually likely to get a higher score because that means that you've been practicing the language for long enough and you have a good command of the language. So don't be afraid of talking about using colloquial phrases or words like or such as in. All of these are good to use. Also, as illustrated by sounds a little bit formal, but if it's about a lecture and you want to describe an example that the professor has given, as illustrated by is a really good option to have. Let's look at this phrase in action. It's a complex process as illustrated by the professor's explanation of the Machu Picchu excavations. So excavations are basically when archaeologists and historians dig for like ancient relics or artifacts. That's what excavation means. Just looking for objects from ancient civilizations. Paintings of this era are famous because of renowned artists like Picasso and Dali. This phenomenon only occurs under certain conditions, such as low temperatures. So you don't have to use all of these expressions in all of your answers. Just pick 2 or 3 that you find comfortable using and stick with those. So you can sort of recycle or reuse these in the different tasks. But it's always good to have a few options so that you don't sound repetitive and you don't use the same one over and over again. All right, time for the last tip. Are you ready? Tip number 3. This one's pretty easy. You just got to record yourself. What does that mean? You need to record your answers to practice questions and make sure to listen back. This is basically what will help you. Record your answer, listen back, give yourself a score using the marking criteria that we looked at earlier, and then repeat the process, trying to improve the bits that you struggled with. How is this going to help you improve your score? If you look at the delivery criterion, quite a few things that they're looking for. So let's look at the first thing they're looking for is fluid expression. That means it's well-paced. You don't stop too much. You don't do a lot of ums and ahs. This means that you don't stop too much. There aren't awkward pauses, not a lot of ums and ahs. So you want to avoid those things, and it's really hard to sort of understand whether you're doing them or why you're doing them. So if you record yourself and listen back, it's easier to spot those errors. Similarly with pronunciation and intonation difficulties, it's easier to spot these errors afterwards, because when you're like giving your answer, right? Like when you're recording your answer, you're not really focusing on these little tiny bits of information. You're thinking about the content, you're thinking about what you're going to say next. There's so many things going on in your head. It's just impossible to keep these little things in mind. So it's always good to go back, listen to yourself, and the next time you record your answer, you'll be more mindful of these mistakes. All right, and it's not just in the independent speaking tasks, right? It's also in the integrated speaking tasks that you'll be judged on fluid and sustained speech, which is basically fluid expression, and difficulties with pronunciation and intonation. So it's going to help you with all the tasks in the speaking section. So once you've done this, you can expect to get a 4, which is the highest score that you can get for each task in delivery, language use, and topic development for both task types. And once you've mastered all these skills, you're on your way to getting a 30 out of 30. But all of this knowledge is kind of useless if you don't put it to good use. So you need to practice. You need to practice these skills, you need to practice these tips, and that's how you will be able to get a 30 on 30. So if you want to practice your speaking skills, head over to etlanguage.com, where we have a bunch of different questions for each of these speaking tasks. And don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share.